Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Apis Baltic channel. Today, our topic is Varroa mites, and I know that's a very important topic for everyone. So I wanted to do a short presentation on that. Uh, and we're gonna split it into parts. So first part will be the principles of Varroa mites. So we'll try to understand how it works. I'll try to go through it quickly. And then in another video, which I will upload, we're gonna talk about different Varroa mite treatment strategies. What is the current methodology that majority of beekeepers adopted? What are the pros and cons of different methods of treatment? And then I'll suggest a case, how we do it in our apiary, and how does it work for us. So let's focus now on the first part so that we have the understanding how actually Varroa mites work, and then we can see how the strategy for treatment aligns with the parasite's life cycle. So today we're going to talk about four things. So that's where do the mites reproduce? What is the current understanding of mites and the harm that they do? Then we're gonna talk what do the mites feed on, and lastly we're gonna go into how do the mites do the harm to the bees. So let's not wait and begin. So the main thing is, where do the mites reproduce? So they reproduce in capped brood. They prefer drone brood over worker brood because the drone brood takes longer, 24 days to hatch. So mice are able to reproduce one more offspring. So instead of 2 to 3 offsprings, you can do 3 to 4 offsprings per one cycle. So that's why they prefer drone brood over worker brood. So that's what we have to have in mind when talking about Varroa mites, and we'll talk later about the treatment strategies. That's the main point that we have to understand. It's capped brood. They enter before capping, they wait until the bees cap it with the wax, they sell, and then they start to reproduce. All right, so having this in mind, let's go further and explore what is the current understanding about the Varroa mites. Nowadays, people, beekeepers, at least in Lithuania, we have this phenomena. I suppose that throughout Europe, maybe it's a little bit better, but I think that majority of beekeepers think that Varroa mites feed on the hemolymph of honeybees. That's quite an old understanding, which came through the wrong translation from Russian scientists, who, if I recall correctly, in the 70s, tried to explore what the Varroa mite, and they thought that it might feed on hemolymph, and then it got translated into Western journals that Russian scientists indeed proved that Varroa mites feed on the hemolymph. So that's the current misconception. It's not completely wrong, but it's not completely true either. So let's just explore further how actually the mites feed. Let's split the mite life cycle into two stages: reproduction stage and hibernation stage. So reproduction, when they reproduce, go into brood cells, the mites lay eggs, they reproduce, etc., etc. So it's happening throughout the season. And then in the winter, when they hibernate, that's especially prominent in the regions where we get brood breaks during the season. Like it gets colder, we have winter. So then they reproduce, they eat different food. So let's see. So during the reproduction stage, Varroa mites feed on two things. That's hemolymph. That's what we talked about at the beginning. And then that's fat body. About fat body, there will be a separate video in which we'll explore the topic a little bit more in depth. But fat body is responsible for numerous things happening inside the bee. So that's immune system, storage of nutrients, detoxification of pesticides, etc., etc. So we're gonna dive deeper in a separate video because it's gonna take at least 10 minutes to explore every job that the fat body does. But fat body is responsible for essentially the likelihood that the bee will survive a long period of time. Hemolymph is like blood, which circulates. So when the mite takes up hemolymph, it gets fast energy, but it doesn't get as much nutrients. So it can't reproduce actually very well. So at first, when the mite enters the cell, it feeds on hemolymph to get fast energy, but then to reproduce, because reproduction needs the mite needs to lay the eggs, numerous eggs, and it requires a lot of nutrients, as you can imagine, to lay these many eggs for a small Varroa mite. It takes lots of energy, so it starts to feed on the fat body, and fat body is very rich in nutrients because when honeybee deplenishes of a fat body, then its longevity diminishes and bee only lives for 3 weeks. So when we talk about summer bees at first have high body, fat body, but then they lose it, and then their lifespan reduces to 3 weeks. So that's why during the summer we'd say bees survive only 3 weeks, but not because of flying or gathering resources, but because that the fat body reduces. But we're gonna talk about that in another video. So two things that we need to understand. In the reproduction stage, hemolymph, so it doesn't affect the bee as much when the mite feeds on it. But when the mite feeds on fat body, it affects the bee greatly. Its immune system reduces because fat body is responsible for immune system. It can't survive as long because the vitellogenin, which is accumulated in the fat body, deplenishes. So the longevity of the bee decreases. It cannot fight any pesticides. It cannot fight. It loses water, and etc. etc. So it's very bad for the honeybee to lose the fat body because it basically loses all its lively matter, as if I could say it like that. And then in the hibernation stage, maybe that's not as important in southern part of Europe, but in the northern part of Europe, where we get colder temperatures, in the hibernation stage, the Varroa mite needs a lot of nutrients to survive. So it feeds primarily on the fat body. And during the winter, at least in Lithuania, where we have winter spanning for around 3-4 months, the mite kills 2 honeybees due to extracting all the fat body out of the honeybee. So the misunderstanding about what the mite feeds on leads us to a misconception, which then affects the way that our treatment methodology is adapted. So the main point that I want to express through this whole presentation, that mites feed not only on the hemolymph, but also on fat body. In the other videos, we're going to explore why is it so important, the fat body, but I just want to stress it that it's very important, and fat body is responsible for the longevity, for the immune system, for not losing the water. So if the bee loses fat body, if the fat body decreases, it cannot sustain water inside, so it dehydrates and then it dies. So you can see that if we have a mite which fed on the honeybee, it deplenished it with of the fat body, so the fat body reduced. Then we don't have a healthy bee. We have a sick bee, which cannot live for a long time. It cannot feed sufficiently the offspring. So we have so many problems, and that's why that's the main reason why the colonies collapse, why there is a huge problem about viruses, etc. It's because the fat bodies reduce, and the bees cannot fight anything, and they are just sick and very weak. So that's the main point. And in the other video, we're gonna talk how we can try to adapt it so that we save the fat body, and especially during wintering, if we have sick bees with low fat body, the longevity of the bees reduces. But yeah, as I said, we're gonna talk that a little bit later. But the main point, not only hemolymph, but fat body. That's very, very important. And here I have a picture from Randy's, not from Ramsey, sorry, not from Randy's. Thought of a different scientist. They did the research. I think that one of the most famous that's has been done in 2019. And here they explored how Varroa mites feed on the fat body of adult honeybees. So we can see that the um, Varroa mites choose basically these segments mostly in honeybees when they overwinter in the hibernation stage, because the fat body is accumulated at these points. All right, so now we have the understanding, not only hemolymph, but fat body. Let's continue. So first things first, immune system deficiency. So when Varroa mites feed on the bees, they affect the individual level of the honeybee's immune system. So one thing is that's fat body. When the mites take out some of the fat body of the honeybee, the immune system cannot respond as well, because fat body is responsible for immune system. So the nutrients, the proteins that are in the fat body, they fight the viruses, bacteria. So that's one thing. It reduces the amount of immune system that is in the bees. Another thing is when we think about the whole immune system, which you're gonna find in another video where we talk about that. But when we think about the immune system of the honeybees, the first protective layer against viruses, against diseases in bees, is its exoskeleton. So the skeleton, the outside, so that the viruses can't get inside the bee. But what happens when we have Varroa mites? So let's see another picture here. We have here a Varroa mite under the target of the honeybee. And here we can see in this part that the Varroa mite, when it wants to suck out the content of the bee, so that's fat body and hemolymph, it makes a hole. You can see it right here, right here. And through this hole, what happens? The bee loses its first immune system layer, its shield against the outside viruses. And as you can see, the viruses get inside the bee. So here you can see. So through this hole, you're able to get inside. Right here. And we can see the immune system responding, trying to respond. But what happens? The viruses start to get in. And because our skin, it reproduces, it heals, but the honeybee exoskeleton cannot heal. So the hole is always there. So imagine you have a hole through which viruses get inside, and then the Varroa mite also takes out the fat body, which finds the viruses, which finds the bacteria. So we have two problems. We have a hole and we have reduced immune system. So two things that happen. Viruses get inside and the honeybee is not able to fight them, or is able to fight them less. So that's one of the things, how the Varroa mites hurt the bees. Another harm is the reduction of fat body. So when we have the reduced fat body, as I talked before, I'm not gonna repeat myself too much. So the longevity of honeybees reduces because of numerous things. It cannot sustain water inside, so it dehydrates. It cannot fight the viruses because its immune system reduces. It cannot detoxify small amounts of um, pesticides. It cannot produce vital proteins because fat body is responsible for producing vitamins like um, not vitamins, sorry, proteins. In the fat body, the vitellogenin is accumulated, and vitellogenin is responsible for the longevity. So it reduces. So everything that can happen that keeps the honeybee alive reduces. So that's why we have bees not surviving and we have sick bees. And last thing is drone infertility. So when they did numerous research, numerous tests, numerous studies, they saw that when we have drones that have been infested with Varroa mites, at first when they hatch, they all look okay. And for one day, they look okay. But after one day, half of them, if I recall correctly, they die off. And because the larva is weakened during the metamorphosis stages, basically the drones are infertile. If I recall correctly, I'll put maybe the percentages, exact percentages in the description of the video, but it is 94% of drones are infertile. So you can imagine a problem that's happening here, especially in spring, when we need new queens, when we need fertile queens, we raise them. But if we have high infestation levels of Varroa mites, although we see drones hatching, we see the drones being raised in the colonies, these drones are infertile. They cannot fly efficiently. They have so many problems and they can't reproduce. So what happens? We have poor queen mating. And with poor queen mating, we'll have poor results because the colonies can't sustain themselves. So maybe that's a little bit exaggerating, but because we don't see this problem as much yet. But if we don't take precaution methods and if we don't think about that seriously about Varroa mites, we're gonna have huge problems. So that's the first part. We talked about what the Varroa mites are, where do they reproduce, on what do they feed, and how does it affect the bees. Now, in the next video, we'll talk about how should we fight and how should we treat against Varroa mites that we try to avoid and we avoid these problems.